Thank you for tuning in to another episode of RIA Collective. I'm your host, Charlie Van Derven. I've got a guest today that I'm excited to tap into his knowledge because there's a lot of experience in financial services, and he's kind of a buddy of mine. And it's a new perspective, right? We've interviewed some breakaway attorneys. We've interviewed some head of RIAs, advisors who had just made that transition. Today, my buddy Mark Elzweig is here to talk to us about recruiting in the industry, specifically about the right placements, about what makes advisors successful and happy in their transition. And Mark brings a unique background with psychology and social work prior to joining the industry. So we're going to tap into how that helps him do his job in finding the right landing spots for advisors who are making the move. Mark Elzweig, welcome to RIA Collective, and thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah,
I'm excited to be here.
And in full disclosure, Mark and I have been working together for a couple of years at this point, right?
Yes, Charlie's helped me dramatically expand my LinkedIn contacts and figure out how to use LinkedIn effectively. So it's been a very good relationship.
Thanks for the plug, man.
It's all true.
Yeah. Now, Mark, you and I are kindred in more than one way, but one way I know is that we enjoy traveling in new places. So where, just as a background, Mark, you and your wife, Nancy, you're cruising around the country working kind of, wherever the breeze may take you. Is that right?
That's right. We've been having a fantastic year. Like since February, we've been staying 4 to 6 weeks in different cities and working remotely. I'm lucky my wife can work remotely as well. Yeah. So far, let me think. We've been to Austin, Texas,
great,
Nashville, Tennessee, Charleston, South Carolina, Denver, and right now I'm in Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. Why'd you pick Pittsburgh Pittsburgh in November? You'd think that was like a July place you might want to go to.
Well, frankly, we're just visiting friends. It's not my ideal place to spend November. I'm more of a sun person.
Yeah.
But luckily, there are some great things to do here. And yesterday we saw a house designed by Frank Lloyd Wright.
Very cool.
And it was really quite beautiful. We have a couple of something called the Incline and some art museums lined up for later in the week. So I think it should be it should be really fun.
And make sure you get that if I'm pronouncing it right, Primanti Brothers sandwich.
All right. Well, I'm going to remember that.
Got to go check that out. So
I'll have to check it out. But it's been a fun experience working remotely, and I'm really glad we're able to do it. So
isn't it? I mean, it's just such one of the great benefits of all the technology we have to surround ourselves with now. And we did it with COVID, right? Bought the travel trailer, hit the road for 10 months. And now I'm cruising a little bit. I was in Fort Lauderdale with my camper last week at Joe Lucas Magellan Vision 2023. That was awesome.
Wow.
I love it. I'm working from home now. So I got to get out, got to broaden things a little bit.
No, it's fun. We're not drivers. We like to fly to a different city and then just stay there for a while. But the experience of being able to live in different places and to be able to stay there long enough to get a sense of kind of what it's about, what it would be like to live there is it's been really fun. I've met some really interesting people too.
I'm sure you have. Pittsburgh's awesome, man. I love Pittsburgh. I was it's been a couple of years. And I was there on, a firm had brought me in to do some speaking and some coaching. So they set me up with like Penguins tickets. And so
oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty good. It was pretty good.
Fun.
It was pretty good. So very cool, Mark. Well, listen, I want to dive in before we get into the recruiting piece of it.
Right.
I mean, you come out of a psychology and social work background.
Yes, I do.
It's a little different than most of the people in the industry who are coming into this industry with a finance degree or, something, let's say on the, I would say psychology and social work, I mean, the softer skill piece of things.
Right.
I've got my guesses as to how that helps you today, but how did that prepare you for a world in financial services?
Well, it's actually kind of an accident. I mean, I really, my father had an employment agency, and each of my siblings, have recruiting firms. So I came from like a recruiting family, but I started out in social work. And the thing that I learned from social work is really how to help people make difficult decisions. That's what I found that I I really like doing listening to what they really want, reviewing with them the pros and cons of different choices. And I kind of I wasn't aware when I was a social worker that I would ultimately come back, into the kind of business that my family does.
Yeah.
But it's really helped me a lot. And I find, again, helping people evaluate things and make difficult decisions it's really what I like doing in life. So I feel I'm in a good, it was kind of a unpredictable path, or a path I didn't foresee rather, but it's kind of worked out very well for me in that sense.
It's very cool. I think that those might be the best paths, right? The ones that are
Yeah.
that happen by nature as opposed to being forced. I think that's great. And I grew up, my mom was a social worker. In fact,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So and she got her bachelor's in social work the same year I graduated from high school. So it was something that she went back to school for, went and got her master's degree. And let's say her second career was social work. So
Oh, wow. Oh,
something
that's
that's kind of,
interesting.
something that's kind of near and dear. And
Right. Now I see especially why it resonates with you, but my background in that sense has really helped me a lot. And also, as the industry has become a lot more complex than it was when I started, 30 some odd years ago, they were basically wirehouses and regional firms.
right.
And that was it. So now the opportunity set for advisors is a lot broader and a lot more varied. So I find that many of the skills that I learned as a social worker have really fit in much better, or fit in especially well, because there's a complex landscape that I can help people evaluate.
Well, then I love that, right? Because as the complexity grows, so does the value for a person in your position in service to the industry, right?
Exactly.
So there are so many options nowadays, and I've been for a little over 2 decades, but same. I mean, so you and I have had this opportunity to watch advisors really that migration to an independent landscape. We've been able to kind of, you closer to it than me, but we've been able to witness that really speed up in the last probably 10 years. Been
Right.
it's reached a fever pitch for a number of reasons. You wrote an article, Mark, about why people are successful. Think Advisor article. How long ago was that?
That was just a couple of months ago, actually.
Okay.
That was a little bit earlier this year. I was just thinking about a lot of the teams and advisors that I worked with, what the characteristics were of people who had made successful moves and transitioned their accounts properly.
So in the episodes we published of RIA Collective and the advisors I get to talk with, I think I've narrowed down 5 reasons that people make that transition. That's a different conversation. What is it that helps somebody make that transition successfully?
I would say the first and primary attribute that someone has to have, they have to have been able to set up their business so that clients see them as irreplaceable. Clients see them as kind of like, you might think, if you're watching a symphony, you're looking at the conductor of the orchestra, and the firm is kind of analogous to the musicians in the orchestra pit. They're there, they're valuable, but they're kind of blurry and in the background. So those people who've been able to set up their business so that clients rather recognize their value, and in terms of, they're the ones setting up the customized financial plan. They're the ones setting up the particular investment program. Advisors who've been successful in doing that, those people are able to move their businesses successfly no matter what. Yeah, and that's one very key attribute of someone who's moved successfully.
And great analogy. And we key on a lot, making sure that you're protecting the personal brand, even if you're representing a large brand. You are the brand. You're the individual that people are working with. So I think those go very much hand in hand.
Exactly. And I did have an experience with thinking about one team a couple of years ago that I placed, and they went from one wirehouse to another. When they went to the wirehouse they joined, 2 weeks after they joined, had like a terrible scandal. They were like in the newspapers in a really negative way.
Yeah.
for a long time. This was their second week that they were there, and
Wow.
obviously I
Wow.
felt terrible. However, they brought over all their accounts. And the reason they were able to transition their clients is because their clients recognized that they were the ones who were providing them with value, and they had very close relationships with their clients.
Yeah.
And I kind of contrast that to someone I knew who was, as a young advisor, the way he opened his accounts, he was calling from a different wirehouse, and he would tell people, listen, these are the 3 reasons why I'm with the best firm in the business, and that's why you should open an account with me. Now, when that particular advisor made a move several years later, that was a mess. He was kind of, I wouldn't say he was destroyed, that's too strong a word, but he did lose a lot of clients. And the reason he lost a lot of accounts is because he was subtly conditioning his clients and prospects to view him as a representative of the firm.
Yeah.
And you never want that, because then you're replaceable.
Yeah.
So he learned from that experience, but it all comes back to basic positioning with clients. And that's something, as an advisor, you have to do from the very beginning of your business. And you have to do every day in a subtle way of your working life. Make sure the clients understand that you're the point person. You're the person who's helping them achieve their goals, and you're the person who's making it happen. So that's trait 1. That's the most important thing.
Well, what if we've got an advisor, Mark, who's been at a firm for 7 years? They're listening to our recording right now.
Right.
And they have not done an effective job, but they know they need a change. They know for whatever reason, they need a different path in their career. What's your suggestion there? Is there an amount of time they should be working on that relationship? Any thoughts behind that? If they've been touting the firm for a long time, how do they start to move away from that?
Right. I think the first thing they should do prior to making a move is try to rebrand themselves. Try in a subtle way to make clients understand that, that of course you're with a good firm. If it wasn't a good firm, you wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
But the firm offers a multiplicity of choices, and they're the ones who are basically doing the customized financial planning, picking the investments. And I would say the first step is not to suddenly move, but to try to rebrand themselves. Even if it takes 6 months or a year, but stay in place, rebrand themselves where they are. And then once they feel confident in that, then they can start to explore their options.
I completely agree. 6, 12, 18 months, whatever that is.
Right.
And when you're ready to move,
Right.
12 and 18 months might feel like a long time. But if it's
Right.
the difference between retaining 80% and 50% of your assets, I think it's worth that investment.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about traits of those advisors who have made that move successfully in the past.
The second thing that they're able to do, they're able to show the client why the move is in their best interest. And that comes out of the due diligence process, because that's another step that when an advisor is considering other firms, they need to spend a lot of time, and they should never rush. They need to be very thorough, but they need to spend a lot of time scrutinizing the platform of a prospective firm, seeing what's on the menu, what the cost of different products and services are, talking with advisors that have a similar style of business to them at that firm, and kind of cross-referencing their conversations with product specialists. But the advisors who moved successfully didn't rush their due diligence and were very thorough. But once you feel that you've chosen a firm that's going to be better for your clients, then you have kind of ammunition in terms of being able to get them excited. When you move, you can say that that the firm that you've chosen, that you're going to be able to have better lending, more private banking services, whatever your interest is. But you have to show the client why it's going to be better for them, and why that was influential, if not paramount, in your choice. And sometimes it can even be things like having more investment freedom to service them better.
I love that.
Yeah, so for example, there's one wirehouse where there's kind of relentless pressure to do securities-based lending. That means, so the branch manager, the branch manager must have every advisor have at least 2 accounts that are signed up for securities-based loans. The clients don't have to use the credit line, but it has to be in place. Now, some advisors feel that, especially in an environment of rising interest rates, that's detrimental to the client. So when I placed someone earlier this year out of that wirehouse, he was able to tell them very truthfully, there's nothing wrong with that firm, but I've been under relentless pressure to offer you these lending services. I don't think, whether they're appropriate or not, I don't think that's something I want to do. And I needed to be in a place that was more laissez-faire, so I would be more comfortable and have more freedom as your advisor to service you better. So, that really was what was motivating him. So that's the second thing. You have to show clients why your move is better for them.
Yeah, I love that. And I've watched advisors make that move, and some of them coaching clients. And so we've got to work on the messaging. The messaging always comes back to their responsibility to the client.
Right. And I'm glad you're doing that, because I always do that too. Anyone I work with, before they move, we always have a conversation about how they're going to sell that to their clients.
Yeah, right.
How they're going to position it. And that's a very important thing.
Yeah. So
that's a very important thing.
Lean on that fiduciary responsibility in that messaging by all means.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So that's a big motivator.
Yeah.
Well, I would say the other thing is that people who've moved successfully are always not the due diligence I alluded to earlier. That's, of course, really important to enable an advisor to make the right choice. But the other thing is they're thorough. They're thorough in other ways. So, for example, if an advisor is making a move, it's a very different move if you're coming from a protocol versus a non-protocol firm. Sure. And you need to have, advisors who move successfully. They've always had conversations with the legal department, so they know exactly what they can do and what they can't do. And they've always had several in-depth conversations, if not meetings, with people on the transition team. So they know exactly what the mechanics of the transition is. Yeah. So that's a very important thing as well. So being thorough in that way is being thorough and they also know, especially, you want to always play by the rules. Mm-hmm. So it's a basic thing that you can't discuss your move in advance with any clients, right. And you can't take any information that a firm would consider to be non-public proprietary information. So it's very important that an advisor stay within the guidelines. That's another basic ingredient of a successful move.
For sure. And we've got, of course, Mark, I think maybe we're doing interview 20 or 21 right now of RIA Collective. 12 or 13 are published, so we got some in the bank. Right. One really great resource, and I'd love to connect the two of you if you don't already know him, is Corey Kupfer.
Something, I'd love to be connected with him, because I did have a conversation with him once. I'm about to listen to the podcast. It's awesome. It's in my queue. But yes, I would love to chat with him, because someone like that could be very helpful. And it's very important for, even if an advisor is moving from a protocol firm, which is a lot easier. It means you really just have to adhere to some basic rules, right? And you won't have a legal issue. It's still helpful to have your own attorney just to answer some other questions. So someone like Corey, I'm sure, could be very helpful.
Corey's great. And of course, he's offered to be a resource to any of the listeners of the podcast. So if you haven't listened to the Corey Kupfer, Mark, for you, but all of our listeners also, if you haven't listened to it, he's a great dude too. I mean, he's not only trying to move himself and the advisors he represents forward, he's trying to move the planet forward with a lot of his actions. So
that's nice.
He's a really good guy. So by all means, and any other interviews, that look interesting, of course, I think everybody to this point has said, sure, I'll be a resource. So lots of people to chat with and in being thorough before you make decisions. So
absolutely. And of course, I'd be happy to be a resource to any of your listeners as well, who have any questions about the mechanics of either choosing a firm or making a move. I'm sure I could help people with those kind of questions.
Yeah. And before we wrap, I'll get all your contact information on the recording so that they know where to go.
Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, of course, Mark. And listen, I love that you're willing to do that, right? Because it's a scary move. And a lot of times those captive environments, they want to scare you into,
Right.
I had a conversation this morning, Mark. I mean, literally we're recording this the week of Thanksgiving right now. So it'll be, about the first of the year before it publishes. But I had a conversation this morning with a group of advisors, team of two, that they're at a wirehouse and they're really examining what their future looks like. And we almost have to talk in code talk, because our conversation is at their office, right?
Right.
It's amazing just by listening here and tapping into the resources that are available from this podcast. And of course, there's lots of others. I think they listen to me because, I've been a coach of theirs for a while. The amount of resources that we're making available for advisors making that move to independence, Mark, thank you for being on that list. It's having an impact. I feel awesome about it. Right. So very cool. Anything else on that list of the advisors that you've seen make that move successfully?
Well, yes. The last thing I would say is that the advisors who move successfully accept imperfection. And what I mean by that is no move will be flawless. There's a lot of moving parts. There are always one or two things that just aren't going to go 100% right. And you have to accept that. And the ones who are the most successful are able just to kind of just let it roll off their back. They just realized that they had an objective in mind. They were overall, the move was successful in helping them achieve their objectives. And if a couple of things weren't 100%, that was okay. So I think that was another trait of people who've had successful moves.
Much like hiring, and we've done a lot of that over the years, much like hiring, the day you interview that person is the best they're going to be. They are the best, now you can increase knowledge and everything else. But as far as who they are, that's the best representation you're ever going to get. The same, I would believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when an advisor sits down with a prospective firm and meets with that team that would help them transition as they're kicking tires and trying to make their decisions, that's probably that's in large part the best they're going to get from that firm, the firm putting their best foot forward in hopes to attract. Now, my point in all this, Mark, I don't know if I know a single transition that someone said, I got everything that they told me I was going to get. Now, I know that, they told me I'd get this one thing and it was a variant of that, so sometimes the picture that is painted by the firm isn't exactly the situation that an advisor lands in. Right.
I think that's true, but I think the way to ameliorate that is you want to get key terms of your deal in writing. You may want to show them to an attorney. And as much as possible, you want to cross-check a lot of your impressions with advisors who are currently working at that firm. And those advisors don't need to be in the branch or the location that you're contemplating going to. Like if you do, bond business, they could be in another state.
Sure.
But you want to have like a nitty-gritty conversation with them about doing bond business. And you also want to test drive their computers and their workstations
Sure.
to see exactly how you do it. But I agree, sometimes I think people, I luckily haven't had problems with firms intentionally misrepresenting things, but I just mean that in the transition itself, sometimes they're like paperwork or clerical things that
Gotcha.
just go awry, and that's just,
Gotcha.
that's just life. As I often say, utopia in Greek means no place.
Oh,
And I think
I was nowhere. Yeah, that's a good analogy
and I
too.
think that's I found that a very helpful motto
Yeah.
over the years.
Yeah, and I don't mean to say that like they're like people are duping people into making a decision.
Right,
That certainly isn't
right,
it. But as
right.
they lay out the roadmap of transition, they're laying out here's the ideal roadmap of transition. Ideal is likely not going to happen. So you've got to your point, you've got to be
Right.
flexible and be able to roll with the punches to some degree.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. That's what I found.
Mark, I found a great white paper, if you will, downloadable piece that you had put together at one point. And maybe I
Mhm.
should have asked about that before I asked about the article. But happyfinancialadvisors.com, which actually is a great domain name. Dang, man.
Thank you.
How
Thank
does
you.
how does someone get happyfinancialadvisors.com? What a great domain name. The fun we could have with that.
It
Um,
is.
so you wrote a white paper that's all about the path to success and happiness. And one of
Mhm.
the things that stood out for me there is that there's key reasons that advisors are not happy. And
Right.
again, maybe I should have brought this up before the article. Maybe we should have set the stage with
Mhm.
the unhappy before we went to the
Mhm.
successful. But so, maybe we can flip it and we can reverse it in post production. We're not really going to do that. But Mark, what makes a person move? Why is someone unhappy that they're looking at that transition?
Well, I think usually people typically move to resolve a problem. There's something going kind of wrong, and they move to resolve the problem. But in terms of happiness, I mean, what I did with that white paper, which was fun, I like to read about psychology anyway. So I read like a couple of books in a field of psychology called positive psychology, which is really about how people. It's not about rectifying character or personality flaws. It's really about how regular people can function at an optimal level and be happier.
Cool.
And one thing that works against people's happiness is a sense of control. If you feel, if you're at a big firm and every year they change their payout, because they feel like it, that's detrimental to someone's sense of control and
Certainly.
someone's happiness. And that even some things like that are a very big motivator for people to go independent. So to whatever extent you can control your environment in the sense of being a decision maker in terms of what your financial and investment program is, which kind of clients you have, that how you're going to organize your team, having a sense of control and a sense of purpose. Those are two things that are very happiness enhancing activities. The third thing, which comes out of something called flow, which is that was a really interesting notion. Flow means like what you're doing is you are taking a task that's kind of a little beyond you. It's hard, it's difficult, it's challenging, and you're throwing yourself into it with total focus. You don't have one eyeball on your email, because if you do that, you'll never get into that flow state. But once you work as hard as you can with great focus, it produces a tremendous sense of happiness. You lose your sense of time, your sense of self, your sense of everything. And if you can do things to constantly challenge yourself, meaning it could be learning more about being an advisor, about investments, about behavioral psychology as it applies, as you can apply it to investors in whatever way you can kind of it can be a prospecting program that you undertake. When you're pushing your limits and you're focused on getting better and increasing your sense of mastery and competence, that's a happiness producing activity. So the guy who came up with the concept he basically says, sitting on a beach, having a cocktail, that might be okay for a bit, but it's really a formula for boredom. That's not happiness.
Yeah.
Happiness is challenging yourself and engaging in activities that give us an increasing sense, an enhanced sense of mastery. And I found that an amazing insight. So he's saying, don't sit and watch a concert all the time, learn to play an instrument, get better and better, get a little better every day. That's what's going to make you happy. And
Progress.
it's right in front of us and it's available to everyone. So I found that a very interesting and empowering notion, but I think it's one that advisors can apply to their business.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Mhm.
100%. There's so much to learn. There's so many options in the industry. And I think, to our point, as we began the conversation, as you and I have had a chance to watch this now for two or three decades.
Right.
And that transition to independence is just speeding up.
It's speeding up dramatically.
I did a presentation on Friday. And so I learned, I did a little research. I learned there's 612,000 registered reps in the country. That's FINRA's number in 2021. Do you know that number? And some of it by retirement, of course, but that number continues to decrease every single year, Mark. And the number of SEC registered IARs is increasing dramatically to the point where I think we've got 65,000 in the country now. So that's
one reason for that is, well, I think there are a couple of reasons. One reason is once you're independent, you have much more of a sense of control.
Yeah.
I mean, of your life. I mean, I myself, if I decide I want to spend a little more time in the pool in the morning, I can come in a half an hour later since I don't have a boss to bother me about it. And I think even small things like that can add to our sense of happiness. But the other reason, though, is I think that, the RIA model is appealing because it's kind of fiduciary oriented. And more advisors want to feel, most advisors, I would say, want to feel that they have a fiduciary mindset when they approach and deal with clients. But also the mechanics of independence have changed so that right now, it's easier and more lucrative to go independent than it ever was.
Yeah, no doubt.
And that's in terms of the kinds of resources that are available, the kinds of recruiting deals you can get. There are a lot of off the beaten path monetization opportunities. So instead of in the beginning, where I'm sure you remember, Charlie, the people that went independent were those people who were being browbeaten and pushed out of the wirehouses. They were the lower producers. The people who are going independent now are some of the best people in the business.
Yeah,
they're like the top. They're the absolute top performers, and there's a whole cadre now of new emerging independent, like of these turnkey RIAs that cater to just those kinds of high-end people. So I think the movement to independence, I can feel in the last year that it's accelerated, and I think that's where things are going.
I think so too. And we, I'm happy to be a part of it. I really truly believe that in order to be a true fiduciary, and that there's a lot of weight with that word. And I think it's thrown around a lot, but if you can take the bias out of a relationship like an RIA, so straight fee based, and, I think that's the best place for someone who wants to represent that word in, with true integrity. So,
yeah, I think it's a very appealing model for many people.
Mark, you're a great guy, and I appreciate our friendship, and you working with our team at Social Advisors, and our ability to get to know each other over the last couple of years. If anybody wants to tap into your knowledge and experience in the industry, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
They can either just go onto my LinkedIn profile or email me on via my website, or my phone number is right there. Whatever is good for them. But I'm really, I love talking with people. I guess that's why I'm in this business.
Yeah.
And I'd be delighted if people would like to reach out to me rather, just for information. I'd be delighted to chat and be as helpful as I can.
And of course, I've got happyfinancialadvisors.com, but is markelzweig.com, correct?
Oh, it's really just Elzweig at Elzweig. So it's kind of tough one, but ELZWEIG at Elzweig at Elzweig. Well, Elzweig at Elzweig.com is my email. My website is just Elzweig.
Elzweig.com. Okay. I was
Yes.
putting your first name in
Yes.
there too. Mark Elzweig, thank you so much for being my guest on RIA Collective today. And thank you for taking time out of your day for listening to another episode of RIA Collective. Of course, we don't have huge backing, so if this is good for you and you know somebody who would benefit from Mark's knowledge, please by all means pass it on to them, and make sure you subscribe and leave a review on your favorite listening platform, and come back and check in often because we're pushing out new episodes every week. Mark Elzweig, thank you so much. Great.
Thank you,
great
Charlie.
to see you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Love having you. Thanks for being here.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun.